Hello everyone, I'm Vivian from JoyPac. JoyPac is a hyper-casual mobile publisher. And today, by the way, Happy New Year. So now we are going to talk about the new opportunity in Asia. And as you can see, all our guests, special guests, flying all the way from Asia. Actually, they are going to cover all the Asia territories, basically. So would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit new about you guys? What's new?
Okay, yeah, so my name's Aaron. I'm from a company called APPTUTTi. We're like a self-servicing online portal for game developers to publish their apps in mainland China, specifically the Android market, which is about 80% of the market share of all mobile gaming in China. And I'm very happy to be here with my fellow panelists and moderator. Is that enough, Vivian?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hi, I'm JJ, and I think you guys already know me. And I'm at Prolabis, and Prolabis is one of the largest game publishers in Korea now. But actually, I didn't fly all the way from Asia because I'm in charge of the US office for Prolabis. But I am originally from South Korea. I was born there, I grew up there, I worked there before actually I came to the States 12 years ago. So I think actually I probably should pretty much experience both Asian gaming business and US/Western gaming business. And Prolabis, actually, we are actively looking for like a strategic partnership in the Western market, whether it's like M&A opportunity or investment opportunity, so that we can also grow outside of Korea.
Okay.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Landra, and I'm from mixi. So mixi is one of the largest internet venture companies in Japan. We have a huge mobile gaming business, and our flagship title is called Monster Strike. So a little bit about mixi. We have been around for more than 15 years now. So we started out as a social networking service back in the day, which was very popular in Japan. And we moved into mobile gaming, got very successful with Monster Strike as a title. And we have then, used the growth to then grow into 5 key business units, 2 of which are in non-entertainment. So we have the media business, we have a health and wellness business. We also do have, in the entertainment business, we have 3 key businesses, one of which is traditional sports. We also have live experiences, and last but not least, the digital entertainment. I look at corporate planning and strategy, so that's pretty much a little bit about business development, M&A investments, and essentially who to partner with to grow the company. Yeah, so that's a bit of a nutshell.
So I'm curious, who has ever published a game in China here? Good one. Japan? Japan? Okay, I see. Korea. Oh, not bad, not bad. So here, I have a question for you 3, basically. What are the differences between all the Asian markets? Only talking about Asia, since you are specialized there.
Well, just to come in very quickly, I think a little bit of a caveat or like a preamble is that you have East Asia represented very well here. So you have China, South Korea, and Japan. But of course, it's a Southeast Asian market as well. So I can't speak much to Southeast Asia. But just to clarify that, you want to talk about East Asia, or you want to talk about like all of Asia?
It's a pretty big continent, The Southeast Asia, it's not our expertise. We, as APPTUTTi, are mainly focused on mainland China, a market that is incredibly difficult to get into and incredibly lucrative. And obviously we have Korea and Japan here too. So I think that's our expertise.
Yeah, I can't cover India as well. I have very little expertise in India.
How about Japan these days?
Okay.
What are the main differences?
So So everything that you hear about Japan is pretty much true. It's essentially a very niche market to get into, mainly because the gaming industry in Japan is quite mature. It has been around for a very long time, and the users have essentially grown to like a specific type of content and a specific way of playing content. So to give you a very good example, like some games are very intuitive to Japanese users, but maybe too complex for non-Japanese users or non-Asian users, just because of the content they're playing with in the region. I would say that it is also one of the highest monetizing regions, or one of the highest monetizing countries in terms of ARPU and average revenue per player spend, in terms of if you compare versus all the other markets. And it's very long tail. So what that means also is that if you have very niche type of gameplay categories, you will have a lot of fans that will be very loyal to that niche gameplay category, right? So how it's very different in a nutshell is that if you have very unique contents, right, and that you want to push, I think Japan is an interesting market just because you will have a lot of core followers that will play your game in Japan, and they will monetize very well, and they will have high retention too, because they'll stick with you for a very long time.
Okay.
So yeah, that's Japan. Yeah.
Okay. How about Korea?
Oh, I think, yeah, as actually the other guy said, I think we're more, representing like East Asian countries.
Yeah.
Of course, I think Southeast Asian countries are also a little different. But also, when we launched Black Desert in Southeast Asian countries, yeah, even though we just had like a separate build for those regions, I think monetization and most of the market strategies were pretty same as actually what we did for Korea, Japan, and Taiwan and other like East Asian countries. So I think actually from a Western perspective, probably a lot of things probably work in a similar way. But as I just mentioned, we also see a higher ARPU in Japan. So even with the same content, especially for Black Desert Mobile, we actually see a lot more numbers, like a great numbers in terms of the monetization. So I think people definitely have a very like a high spending powers. And when you have like a very loyal Japanese customers, actually you or game actually can do well for a long time. I think things are a little kind of like go in a shorter cycle in Korea. There's a very strong trend when like a certain genres and certain titles do really, really well.
What kind of genres?
I think these days mostly like MMORPG genres are doing pretty well. I think probably it's like the same as like a Chinese market, but I think Korea is definitely one of the countries where the MMORPG genre is going really strong, especially on mobile platforms. So I think a lot of like MMORPGs or like a hardcore genres in general are doing pretty well in Korea in terms of genre-wise.
I see. So now, since 2 years ago, like instant platform is growing also rapidly in Korea and Japan, including China, of course, WeChat, Kakao, Line, and so on. How's those hyper-casual game going? I mean, of course, within your territory and so on.
So for those that aren't familiar, there's a messaging app called WeChat, which serves basically the whole of China, so over 1 billion users. And in the messaging app, you can do all sorts of things. You can pay your utility bills, you can chat, but you also have access to instant games. So they're HTML5 games that are mini programs, so you don't have to download a separate game. So a lot of hyper-casual games are being picked up by Tencent, which is the mother company of WeChat. And these hyper-casual games are being able to be played in the app WeChat without having to leave, without having to download. So a lot of developers are actually providing HTML5 games for these mini programs to monetize their games. So in terms of hyper-casual, it's obviously exploded around the world. I think hyper-casual has really, it's the epoch, like it's what most people are looking to publish now and what most developers are looking to make. But there's also, like, in Korea, for instance, MMORPGs are like a huge part of the market as well as just like JRPGs, like all of these kind of communicating games where you are online with many players seem to be the biggest revenue suppliers for games in China specifically.
Of course, all the RPG MMO game will be always having its target audience because it's so strong and so well made. But meanwhile, I actually noticed a lot of hyper casual gamers are actually having both game on their phone. So they are playing hyper casual and meanwhile also having a stick with Black Desert and all those kind of MMO games. So do you see hyper-casual as a next opportunity to the developers in your territory?
Yeah, I'll just go in again, because I think hyper-casual is, the main benefit is in China there's a long commuting time. Like most people when they live in cities, most users, they'll be on their phone for a long period of time. Mainly because travel to and from work can take more than 2 hours each way. So during this commuting time, the users are on their phones and they want a game or an experience as well as these MMORPGs.
I agree.
Instantly repeatable, gratifying games that they can just jump into and play, and the match-free type games. All of these hyper-casual games are just for many play sessions in the period of time that they have to use. That's what I've seen.
But actually, how about the revenue side? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because I have no doubt that people are playing a lot of hyper-casual games, like easy games on their phones, especially when they're always on, like WeChat, KakaoTalk, these messenger apps, especially in many Asian countries. But I have no idea about how much actual revenue they're generating. Do you think it's also
so the eCPM in China right now is the second in the world, just behind the USA. So a lot of these games are making their money through ads monetization. So the revenue is good, but of course it depends on the amount of daily active users and what traffic networks are trying to sell to those players. But there's definitely a high revenue model for these hyper-casual games, but it really depends on your user acquisition and how many players you can get to play the games.
Well, to kind of make it simple, there are two different types of hyper-casual. There's a native hyper-casual where you download CPI model and then monetize primarily via ads. And then you have the messenger or the H5, HTML5 type games where it's in your messenger platforms, right? Obviously, monetization in the messenger platforms can be a little bit tricky. It'll be primarily on ads. And I think one thing to take note as well in China, if you were to have in-app purchases in messenger platforms or as a native hyper-casual game, you have to go through the same license application process. That could be a little bit challenging as well. So
how about Japan then?
So Japan is interesting because the WeChat of Japan then would be Line Messenger. So a lot of users, pretty much the majority of users, when they're on Messenger, or if they're on any messaging application, it's going to be online. I can't speak to their strategy. I do know that it's a key focus of their feature pipeline moving forward and how they want to integrate instant games into their platform. I would definitely say that they are really focused on ads-based monetization in Japan, just because of how iffy it can be between the bigger platform holders as well as the messenger platform holders. So that's a huge discussion that's happening right now. And I think it pretty much is the same across the board in various countries too. I would say that for native hyper-casual games, so if you want to be like the next Voodoo, so in Japan, one popular hyper-casual studio would be Geisha Studios. That's also published by Voodoo. And they're a developer of hyper-casual games. I would definitely say that a lot of games are now, hyper-casual games are evolving with increased or deeper meta within their gameplay or new business models, just because when you look at hyper-casual, it's a demand and supply has to kind of support each other. So the ecosystem of hyper-casual is that they're selling to other hyper-casual games, right? And it kind of supports that ecosystem. But as there are more players entering the market and your CPI increases, it does not make any more sense. It's not cost effective anymore to make native hyper-casual games. So I would definitely say that in Japan and in other countries as well for hyper-casual, they'll be moving towards new business models for hyper-casual and increased game meta. for hyper-casual game experiences. So that's what we think will happen, at least for hyper-casual.
Cool. But do you also need to actually culturalize the game then? Localization is one thing, but culturalize the game?
Yes.
Even it's a hyper-casual?
I think that's a very good distinction, like between culturalization and localization. Localization can be as simple as just making sure that the language is correct and local payment options and local advertising options. In terms of culturalization, there's definitely examples of people culturalizing their game for China. For instance, they may stay away from words such as for, because in Chinese it sounds like deaf. They may update their color schemes to include more red, because red is known as like a lucky color. Especially like live ops, they will put in things for like the Spring Festival, Chinese New Year, for instance, like dumplings, hongbao, which is like red packet money. These things can attract a lot of the users. So if you're looking at China specifically, in terms of culturalization, you really want to, there's some best practices to avoid. And China as well is much different to Japan and Korea in terms of regulations. And like Lanja said, IAP is a whole procedure.
Yeah.
But for China, you definitely want to think about culturalization. It's not necessary. I don't think it's necessary. Depending on if you're a hyper-casual, there's not much culturalization you can do. But I do think it's important to localize your games for each of these Asian markets.
Okay. Also for Japan and Korea.
To add on, I mean, this conversation of localization and culturalization has been spoken to death, right? But one thing to take note of is that when you create content for Japan and when you want to culturalize to Japan and you add in Japanese like iconography or like motifs into it, you have to take note that it's what you like, not what Japanese people like in general. So
I agree on that.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that if you have a game, just release it in Japan, at least. I don't think that you should spend that much effort in culturalizing as much, because you definitely find an audience for your contents in the market. I definitely do have to say that if you want to do localization, then you should go all the way and localize the game properly. Right, so take note of the font, take note of the proofreading, making sure that it's relevant, because some translations do sound a little bit awkward in Japanese. So that happens quite a fair bit when you do localization. Definitely encourage you to not try to add in any Japan-specific contents in initial phases of your launch. Yeah.
So adding a few more, I agree with actually what he just said. And I think there are things you definitely have to avoid in certain Asian cultures. I think that's more important to know than just heavily culturalize your content, because it's just hard to culturalize any game content to certain Asian cultures when actually it was not really built that way. So I think from the content standpoint, I think there is ways just to create like a content that really works in a global scale. I think, for example, Korean people just talk a lot about K-pop these days. We never thought actually K-pop would be this popular in other Western countries. It's a little crazy. But when we think about game content, I think there are game contents that really work in a global scale, even without heavy cultural. But there are things you really have to be aware that when you just have this specific content, there might be a little controversies in certain cultures, like certain color or certain words actually that are related to a very bad thing.
Yeah.
I think you just have to know those things and then avoid those. And I think like a lot of cultural things actually really can be also shared as well. For example, like in Korea, like something like Halloween was not popular at all before, but now actually more and more young generations are enjoying Halloween parties even without knowing what it came from, where it came from. So I think different cultures actually can be also shared in the same game content, but there are things also technically have to be done, like to meet certain requirements or regulations. There is this government regulation in Korea. So if you develop a game for teens, like under a certain age, you actually have to implement this shutdown system in your game, so that underage people can't access your game after certain hours. Usually it's midnight, so you actually have to implement that system that shuts down the servers for a certain group of people at a certain time if you want to run your game in Korea for a certain age groups. So there are things like this you just have to meet in terms of technical standpoint and regulation standpoint, and there are things to avoid for sure, but I wouldn't actually recommend just too much culturalization.
Yeah, I actually
content.
strongly agree with three of you because I met a lot of developers, and they were all asking me, how do we do culturalization? What do you guys like, and so on. I was like, guys, actually stick with your creative idea. Eventually a good game will fly in anywhere, and we just need to find something unique. So thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.